Greetings. I'm Reverend Dr. Stacy Cole Wilson, the Executive Minister of Justice and Service for the Baltimore-Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church. Thank you for joining us here today for our Everyone Counts series. Today we have with us Todd Cagwin of the Maryland Legal Aid. We're so glad that he is here with us, and we just invite you to journey with us. You'll see down below that you can live tweet at Everyone Counts. I also invite you to join us on our webpage at www.bwcumc.org/everyonecounts to learn more about this series. And also, please, we invite you to just place your questions in the Q&A throughout the webinar. And at the end of the session, the presentation, we will make sure that we answer your questions. This is also recorded, and you can watch this video on our YouTube station as well. So again, thank you. Please help me welcome Mr. Cagwin, Attorney Cagwin. As I introduce him, Todd Cagwin has been with Maryland Legal Aid since March 2018 as a staff attorney in the Community Lawyering Initiative. In this role, he provides legal services through community outreach programs, including Lawyer in the Library and expungement clinics. Through such clinics, community lawyering strives to reduce barriers to employment and housing. Prior to Maryland Legal Aid, Attorney Cagwin had a solo law practice for 5 years, assisting clients with landlord, tenant, contract, and wills estate matters. Additionally, during that time, Attorney Cagwin represented arrested individuals at their initial appearance hearings. Again, welcome. Here's the website for Maryland Legal Aid, mdlab.org. I invite you to take a look at it. And at this time, I just invite you to pause with me for a moment of silence and a brief prayer as we uplift the prayers of God's people here and around the nation. Gracious and eternal God, we honor you, and we thank you for being mindful of your creation. We thank you for connecting our lives for such a time as this, and we thank you for hearing every groan. You see all things. You know each one of us. You know our deepest cries, and you are great enough to meet us at the point of our need. Thank you, God, for all that you are and the many ways in which you order our steps according to your word. Lead and guide us as we uplift before you all of creation. It is in your name we pray. Amen. Attorney Cagwin, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Wilson. And thank you also, Reverend King, for having us here. Thank you to the Baltimore-Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church for putting this on and for partnering with us and giving us the opportunity to present this information during this obviously trying time. Hope everyone is staying safe and staying healthy. As mentioned, my name is Todd Cagwin, and I am a senior staff attorney with the Community Lawyering Initiative. Let's see if I can get my screen to advance here. Okay. I've been there about 2 years. This is my direct email and my direct phone line to my desk. So if after this you have any questions about any of the topics we covered or any other legal issues that maybe we did not cover, please do not hesitate to email or call me. We in the Community Lawyering Initiative, we take legal services out into the communities. People might have trouble accessing attorneys, getting to an attorney's office, so we try and bring those services out into the community. Before the pandemic, we probably were averaging anywhere from 28 to 31 clinics a month between libraries, or general clinics in the libraries, and expungement clinics specifically. So we really strive to take services out in the community, not only in the greater Baltimore area, but also statewide. So Maryland Legal Aid has 12 or 13 offices statewide, and my unit specifically out of Baltimore City, we do travel statewide. So we really strive to really raise that community aspect of community lawyering and take it out into the communities where it's needed. So all the information that we're going to present here today is current as of really May 18th. One of the kind of common themes to this presentation is going to be fluidity and change. Everything now with what's going on with this pandemic, I know everyone's probably very restless, ready to get back to a normal life. Everything is ever changing. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. Again, everything in this presentation was current as of about 2 days ago. That doesn't mean that things won't change. Everything is changing pretty regularly. And so just again, keep that in mind. Below that is our email address. So if you have a legal issue regarding stuff that we went over today or something else you wanted to ask about, you can email us at virtualcommunitylawyer@mdlab.org or call the phone number there as well, 443-451-2805. And we'll do a quick intake and just see if this is something we can help you out with, and then get you contact with one of our attorneys. So just a brief roadmap for today's presentation. I want to start out with kind of the current status of each county. I know we had some great news as of last Wednesday, but as you're going to see, things are very specific county to county. A little bit about the court updates during this pandemic time, and then get into tenants' rights, spend a little bit of time regarding that, talk about family law briefly, then get into two other areas that I think are pretty important right now regarding emergency sick leave and unemployment insurance. We're going to touch a little bit on bankruptcy, foreclosure, and debt collection, some of the changes that have been going on during the pandemic times. Talk a little bit about the stimulus checks, fraud, and then again wrap up with some of my my information at the end. The basic thing to keep in mind during this presentation is that this is all geared towards stuff that's been going on since middle of March, since the pandemic came into play. So a lot of things changed. There are a lot of things that is important for people to know about their rights. And so all of the topics we're talking about are specific to the pandemic time since about the middle of March. So last Wednesday, we got some great news from Governor Hogan. You know, the state's going to enter phase one. We've heard this phase one, and we're slow opening of stuff, restaurants, businesses, stuff like that. That didn't mean that the whole state was opened up. So the key thing is, if you're going to head out, know before you go. So there are certain counties that have not entered into phase one. Baltimore City being one of them. I know that was a big thing this past weekend. We had some great weather. Everyone wanted to get outside and enjoy it. And Baltimore City was still as pre-phase one, still on the lockdown. PG County, Montgomery County, and Washington counties also were similar in that they did not enter phase one. Now, there were a bunch of counties that did enter phase one: Hartford, Carroll, St. Mary's, Kent, Charles, Talbot, Calvert. So they all entered into this phase one. Now, others entered into phase one with some limitations. So some stuff opened up, some didn't. Anne Arundel County being one of the big ones, Baltimore County as well. And then there are a few counties that haven't been able to see anything as far as what their phase is, if they've entered into a phase one or not. Again, since May 18th, that could have changed. They might, you know, as of tomorrow or Friday, they might enter into some sort of phase one. So the biggest thing is, again, fluidity, and stuff's ever changing. Know before you go. So just make sure before you start going out to go somewhere, if you're going to a store or somewhere else, try and call to see if they're opened up. Restaurants, stores, businesses, checks, and know before you go. Know if you are allowed to be out and about. Now, with courts, since the pandemic has come into place, as of right now, the courts are scheduled to reopen on Friday, June 5th, meaning that Monday, June 8th will be the kind of first day that the doors have been opened up. Now, from what we know, it's going to be a gradual opening, so it won't be like day one on June 8th, business as usual. But since March, most hearings have been canceled until the courts reopen, which, as I said, right now is about June 8th. That could change as well. We could see that over the next couple of weeks, they might extend the court closure further. There's a lot of talk between the attorneys within the state about what's going to happen, what we suspect will happen. nobody's really sure. So just keep in mind that if you had court hearings scheduled during this time, they're probably going to be rescheduled, but just contact the court so you have an idea, check with the court so you have an idea of when they might be rescheduled to. The only hearings that are still taking place are emergency hearings. So if it's just a general proceeding you had going on, it's likely that it was canceled. Courts are still hearing emergency hearings. Courts that are not e-filing counties, Baltimore City, PG County, and Montgomery County, they are not accepting paper filings. Now, MDEC counties, Baltimore County and Roanoke County, that do accept electronic filings, they are still accepting filings. However, they might not be processing those filings unless it is an emergency matter. As far as all deadlines for filings and responses from court proceedings, those are going to be extended. And so depending on how long the courts are closed, those are going to be extended for about that amount of time. Basically, everything's been put on pause while the courts are closed. Now, hearings that were not put on pause are, again, these more emergency hearings. So domestic violence hearings, peace orders, extreme risk protective orders, family law emergencies, and I really want to stress emergencies. So custody issues, child access, visitation support, those could fall into emergency situations. They might not be deemed emergency situations. Shelter care or adjudications, a lot of those deal with child in need of assistance matters. Emergency delinquency hearings, guardianship. So there's a whole bunch, a lot of them deal with emergency type issues though. Again, here's another list: bail reviews, bench warrants, emergency evaluations, quarantine isolation violations, new protective orders, new peace orders, extreme risk protective orders. Initial appearances are still happening from what we can tell. However, some may be canceled, some or all might be canceled, but call ahead. Again, everything is changing. This is a very fluid time right now. So if you're unsure, if you have a hearing that was scheduled and you're unsure if it was canceled or not, call the courts and check before you go. So there is a website on the Maryland courts have a website. You can check there for either directions and contact information, phone numbers to call. So just check before you go anywhere and see if your hearing that was scheduled is still going on or not. So another change is that certain matters that were previously heard by judges might now be handled by commissioners. So just a quick change. Don't anticipate, if you've attended a hearing before, that hearing is going to be handled in the same way. Again, changes in fluidity. So call ahead, check with the courts if you're unsure. The only way to know is to call the courts and speak with a clerk for sure. So our first big topic, tenants' rights. And this has been a big one since the pandemic has started. The first thing I want to say is if you're able to pay your rent, pay your rent. Just because evictions have been stayed, meaning they're not allowed to happen, and because hearings on non-payment of rent have been rescheduled, doesn't mean that there's just a free pass to not pay rent. If you're able to pay your rent, still pay your rent. Another quick thing that I actually learned yesterday, again, with stuff ever changing, is that rent escrow cases, if you have a rent escrow situation, make sure you're continuing to pay into it. Unfortunately, what I've heard, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a steadfast rule or not, but as of July, any rent escrow account that was not paid into will be dismissed. Could cause a big issue down the road with tenants. So if you have a rent escrow situation, make sure you pay into it. I can't stress that. If you're able to pay your rent, keep paying your rent. I cannot stress that enough. Landlords are not allowed to lock you out. So if they are locking you out, make sure you call your local law enforcement. Again, I'm going to stress this. Make sure you pay your rent. The only way that you can be evicted right now is by a court order. And any dates as far as what I'm talking about here, courts reopening, the they're subject to change. So keep updated with everything. Look into it, call the courts. That's the only way to know for sure. There are some protections that have been put into place since the pandemic started, and there are really three big ones, and the first two are on this screen here. Non-emergency actions have been stayed by the court, meaning basically put on pause until further notice. So that includes evictions, failure to pay rent cases, breach of lease cases, tenant holding over, and rent escrows. They've kind of been put on hold. Now, again, with the rent escrow, I'm going to stress this, make sure you are still paying into it. Any proceedings that had been started when the pandemic occurred, they're just going to be rescheduled. So any hearings that were within the time since about March 15th or 16th, as of right now, are going to be rescheduled for after June 5th. Again, assuming that the courts open up on June 5th. So, before you go, call ahead and check. As far as any filings, stuff could still be filed, but nothing's going to move forward. Some courts, like Baltimore City, because they are paper filing, they might not even accept filings unless it is an emergency filing. So stuff might be filed, courts might accept it, might not accept it, but we do know that nothing is going to be moving forward. The second protection in place is the eviction relief that Governor Hogan put into place, which is in place until the state of emergency ends. So this basically comes into play if courts start hearing eviction cases again. The courts might open up on June 5th, but that state of emergency might not have been lifted, meaning the eviction relief from Governor Hogan is still in place. So it also requires documentation of a substantial loss of income. So just if you have that situation, you've lost a job, you've lost hours at your work, and you're making substantially less income at this time, make sure that you have documentation of that. Also, you can't be you can't be evicted for contracting COVID-19. So if you happen to come down with it, the landlord can't say, I'm evicting you now because you have COVID-19 and I don't want it to spread. They're not allowed to do that. Evictions have been stayed. There are no evictions going on right now. If there is an issue, call 911, call your local law enforcement or the sheriff's office, contact a district court commissioner, and always you can give us a call for the illegal eviction, unsafe conditions. We're here to help. We are here for the communities throughout the state during this time. So first and foremost, call local law enforcement if there is an issue going on, like a wrongful eviction, and then you can call us and we can see what we might be able to help you out with. So another possible protection really came into place when the CARES Act was enacted. And the basic takeaway is that there might be some sort of federal connection to your housing or to the landlord's mortgage on the house that you live in. And so this is a brief flow chart that I've attached, and I've also attached this separately as its own document so that you can have, it's a real simple, I know it's tough to read on the screen, it's a real simple flow chart, and the basic question at the top is, can you be evicted during the COVID outbreak? Basically, every answer in here is no. But the takeaway that we are taking from this is that there's a whole section about subsidized housing or a federally backed mortgage, and there might be some federal protection because of that. So another takeaway from this is that the failure to pay rent, evictions, and late fees are banned right now until July 25th. Again, that's not necessarily set in stone, so just keep that date in mind and keep an eye out for any possible changes moving forward. Again, you can always contact myself or anyone at Legal Aid about that, and we can do a quick check and assist you as well. This also includes Section 8 vouchers, HUD subsidies, and public housing. So this whole flow chart, again, includes all of that, whether you are dealing with a private landlord or if you are in Section 8 housing using a voucher or in public housing. So just keep that in mind. Now, if possible, I urge you to be open during this time with your landlord or the housing authority If you have any sort of reduction in income, if you lose your job, if your hours are cut back, try and communicate that with them. Again, you want to keep paying your rent as possible, but if you can't pay the full amount, try and pay what you can. It's only going to help in the long run if you are open with your with the housing authority, with your landlord, to let them know what's going on. You're showing good faith that, like, I can't pay the full amount, but I can pay this much. Here's what I can pay each month. HUD has encouraged, but they haven't made a requirement. They've encouraged landlords to conduct meetings remotely, and they've tried to delay income recertification. So, they're realizing this is a national crisis affecting basically everybody within our country and pretty much the world. So, so just keep all that in mind, but be open with your landlord or the housing authority. If there is a change to your income, try and communicate that to them. Keep the dialogue open. So again, courts cannot issue a judgment of possession if you're able to show that you lost your income due to COVID-19 or because of something with the state of emergency. The key here is to show documentation of this. You can't just say it and it'll be granted or in your favor. Have documentation to be able to show. We're not sure how much documentation you're going to need, but the more the merrier. Keep it organized, keep records of it, and provide that to the housing authority, to an attorney like us. Now, we're not sure when these cases are going to be heard, but at least you'll have everything organized, ready to go once courts do open up and they start hearing these cases again. Now, regarding utilities, this was a big issue when the pandemic really started. One of our big worries was, what if utility bills aren't getting paid, gas is getting shut off, power is getting shut off. Providers cannot terminate service until this is all over. So your gas can't be shut off, sewage, disposal, electric, telephone, until the state of emergency is over, until the pandemic is over. They cannot turn this off. They also can't charge you any late fees. Now, I'm not saying don't pay your bills. Again, like your rent, if you're able to pay it, because even the late fees aren't be charged. I don't know how this is going to pan out in the back end. If these past due amounts, they're going to then put them onto a bill once this is all over, and then you're facing a very high bill once the pandemic is over. So if you're able to pay, keep paying. Again, I feel just like with landlords, if you are having issues, be open with the utilities. If there's a way to pay, a lesser amount, at least try and pay that lesser amount. They might have payment plans. There might be emergency assistance that you could take part of. So be open with them. A lot of times there are options to at least pay some of it, if you're not able to pay all of it. I know in Baltimore City, and I just learned about this a couple weeks ago, is they have this BH2O program, and it's listed on the Department of Public Works website for Baltimore City. And there are two BH2O programs. There is the BH2O Assist and the BH2O Plus program. Basically, both programs allow a discount on usage for the water bills. Both are about 43%. There are certain fees that they're not applying to each bill. And on average, for a typical bill, an average bill, the user might see about a $40 decrease in that bill amount. There are some eligibility requirements as far as household size, income, stuff like that. So if it's something you want to try and take advantage of, I would look into that if you live in Baltimore City, and just check the website for eligibility. I believe they have the application on the website as well. So check into that. Another option as far as relief for the utility bills that you might be facing that might be mounting up right now. So real briefly with family law, deal with custody, visitation, and child support. Again, the courts are only hearing emergency matters. Whether it's emergent or not is up to the courts. So if you're unsure, maybe it's worth calling the courts. You can still try filing, but the courts might say this is not an emergency matter. We're not going to hear it now. The big thing right now with family law situations is basically anything regarding court orders dealing with custody and visitation or court orders with child support are all still in place. You have to follow them, abide by them. If an order permits and both parents agree that in a custody matter that custody time can be adjusted or altered, that's okay. But if both parents can't agree, then you have to follow the order. Follow that strictly. It might not be ideal, but during this time, nothing's really ideal. To make sure you follow that order. Just be courteous and really use common sense. But again, follow the order. If the order permits, and I'm going to stress this, if the order permits that custody time can be adjusted and both parents agree, then that's fine. If it's silent to that, then just keep visitation with what the order says. Keep the custody arranged as what the order says. Very similar to child support. There's no changes, no exceptions. If you have court-ordered child support, you have to pay the child support. That has not been stayed. So now the next big topic is the emergency paid sick leave, and then following that, I'm going to get into the unemployment insurance. This has again been an two ever-changing topics that we've been trying to keep up on. It's been very difficult. So I'm going to try and go through this in a little more detail. And again, with everything, if there are any questions, we're going to try and leave some time at the end, but also you have all of my information, so don't hesitate to call or email with questions, and we can get them answered. So emergency paid sick leave, who's eligible? It's whether you're full-time or part-time, you are eligible. It applies to private sector employers with fewer than 500 employees. Even smaller companies with fewer than 50 might be exempt, but that's up to the Department of Labor's discretion. So the next slide is going to talk about the COVID-19 related reasons. So I'm going to go into those in a little more in depth on the next slide. But also eligible are employees who have been employed for at least 30 days prior to the leave request, and in which case you might be eligible for an additional 10 weeks. So it really covers everybody, but depending on when you started or how long you've been employed there, you might have some additional time that you're eligible for. So employees can take up to 80 hours, which is about 2 work weeks of emergency paid sick time. And if you fall under one of these 6 qualifying reasons below. So if you're subject to a government quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19, if you've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to COVID-19 or COVID-19 related concerns, if you've been experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and you're seeking a medical diagnosis, if you have to care for an individual who is subject to an order described above in 1 or 2, you might also be eligible. If you need to care for a son or daughter whose school or place of care is closed or whose childcare provider is unavailable due to COVID-19. This one specifically, when it was put into place, it was clear that schools were closed, but then there were instances of private daycares. Do those fall under the schools, public schools and private schools, or is there something separate? So I believe after the CARES Act went into place, they kind of expanded that and clarified that it's not just school, but it's also a place of care, again, due to COVID-19. And lastly, and then if you're experiencing any other substantially similar condition. So the emergency paid sick leave, the big question is, how much am I eligible for if I am going to take advantage of this? Well, going back to the last slide, for reasons 1 through 3, you are eligible for up to $511 a day for $5,110 total. So it's really a cap at that amount daily. For reasons 4 and 6 on the previous slide, you qualify for 2/3 of your pay for up to $200 a day. Now, there's a max amount, so basically the cap is about 80 hours. So you're qualifying for 100% or 2/3 of that for up to 80 hours to that amount daily, $511 and $200 daily. Now, you're also eligible for up to 12 weeks of paid sick leave and expanded family and medical leave at 2/3 of your pay for reason 5 on the previous screen, up to $200 daily, and up to $12,000 total. So there's a lot there between this screen and the last screen. Again, if there are questions about this and whether you're eligible for it, contact us, and we can kind of discuss your particular situation and your eligibility more in depth. If you think that an employer has violated the emergency paid sick leave that's in place right now, file a complaint with the United States Department of Labor, and here's their information and the website. So this is very serious, and from what we can tell, the government's taking it very seriously as well. If employers are violating this, you can file a complaint there. Again, I'd encourage you to contact us, file a complaint as well, and then we can assess the situation and move forward from there. Now, with unemployment insurance, again, a very in-depth topic. This is another flow chart that I have included separately as well. So it's a full page and a little easier to read, but it does a great job of basically, depending on your situation, you can follow through and see if you are eligible for unemployment insurance. Again, this is eligible for part-time or full-time workers, for people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own, or people who were laid off because of a loss of business or production tied to COVID-19. If your employer temporarily closed or reduced your hours because of COVID-19, you might be eligible as well, even though you don't have to have been fired. If your employer closed the door and you're no longer in business, even though you weren't fired, you could still be eligible for unemployment insurance. And again, reduced hours due to COVID-19. So now, who is not eligible for unemployment insurance? Who cannot file for it? Usually, you couldn't file for it because you were sick. You couldn't file for it because you had to take care of someone who was sick, and it also was not eligible for contract workers or gig workers. The changes since this pandemic is now you can file if you fall into one of those categories. So contractors and gig workers are eligible for it. People had to leave their job to avoid exposure to the virus, or if you're caring for an infected family member, you may also apply. You might have to show some documentation, but you might still be eligible. So it's really expanded who is eligible to file for unemployment. Now, if you're not eligible for the Maryland unemployment, you might also be eligible for the pandemic unemployment insurance, PUI, which was a new thing put in place through the CARES Act. So contact us. We can do a quick intake and check to see if you are eligible for that and try and get that process started for you. So how much with the unemployment insurance, how much money will you get? It's about half of the gross weekly wages up to $430 a week. It's kind of an interesting calculation, but it's calculated using the earnings over the first 4 of the last 5 calendar quarters. So it's over an 18-month period. So like, for instance, be looking back at your 2019 earnings. Now with COVID-19, there's might be an additional $600 a week available, but that first calculation isn't going to change. So now how long will that benefit last? Normally it's up to 26 weeks. COVID-19, since the pandemic, this has expanded that for up to 26 weeks total. One thing I want to stress is that from what what we've been reading about this is that receipt of the unemployment insurance, that when I can tell, that's considered taxable income. That may affect your eligibility for other benefits. So just keep that in mind. It will not affect Medicaid or Children's Health Insurance Program benefits. So anything outside of that, just check before you get into it and before you file to make sure it won't affect any other benefits that you are currently receiving. So generally, prior to the pandemic, there were some requirements as far as first obtaining, but then also keeping unemployment insurance. So generally, you were required to be going on job interviews, applying to jobs. The government realized that, well, there really aren't jobs out there. This is the reason why the unemployment numbers have spiked so much. So while you're not required to search for jobs right now, you might be required to do other sort of employment activities, resume work, stuff like that. So just keep a lookout for that. If there are some requirements, make sure that you're doing them. I would hate to have the unemployment benefits stop and then create a problem down the road if it is stopped. So while you don't have to keep going out and looking for jobs, you might be required to do some other job-related activities. So just keep that in mind. Now, how to file for the unemployment. This has been in the news a lot. Many people have been trying with very little success. You know, Maryland isn't alone in that. You hear about states nationwide having issues. As far as I know, I have not heard that it's really been fixed here in Maryland. I still hear on the news that there are issues, people calling in. The one thing we can stress is that you do have control over is when you try to apply. So if you're calling in, try and avoid peak hours. If you're logging onto the website, again, try to avoid peak hours. You're going so far as to setting an alarm for 2 a.m. And getting up at the middle of the night and trying to apply then. But if you are unable to get through, keep trying. Don't give up on trying. By phone, there are certain hours. You could try right at the beginning or, you know, sometime maybe later in the afternoon. But these are the numbers. Keep trying. Don't give up. Once you have successfully applied, I know that there is also issues with people then receiving the benefits, but just keep trying. I know it can be tiring, frustrating, but just don't give up. Keep trying. So you can apply online, you can apply via phone. Again, I'm going to stress this: don't give up. Keep trying if you have had trouble. There is also, I found a clip on YouTube that gives a little bit of assistance with the Maryland unemployment insurance. So if you search what I put in quotes there, if you search, once you're in YouTube, search for Maryland Unemployment Insurance Beacon One-Stop Overview of Claimant Portal. It's not a long video, but it's a quick video. So if you need assistance in filing, this should help. I haven't checked the unemployment insurance website, but I'm sure that there's guidance on there as well. Again, if you need assistance with filing, you can always contact us, and we can try and help you fill out the forms and get everything ready to file for you. So switching gears a little bit into bankruptcy. Bankruptcy filings are still being accepted. They are still doing certain matters, I believe, by video conference or Zoom meetings similar to this. So all non-emergency bankruptcy proceedings in Maryland that were scheduled to take place between March 16th and April 24th have been extended, unless, there's always an unless the presiding judge sets a different date. So again, the fluidity and the ever-changing, if you have a bankruptcy proceeding that's going on that had something scheduled between middle of March and April 24th, call your attorney, call the bankruptcy courts, check on the status. Don't assume that it has definitely been extended by 42 days and that you're going to get a new date. Call to be sure. The last thing you'd want to do is miss a hearing that maybe was set in for whatever reason. So if you're unsure, call the courts and check. Call if you have an attorney with a bankruptcy attorney, call the attorney and ask. All emergency bankruptcy hearings are being heard in Baltimore, and that includes matters that arose in the Greenbelt Division. There are 2 bankruptcy offices in the state of Maryland, courts where proceedings are heard. So all emergency bankruptcy matters are being heard in Baltimore. Foreclosure. All foreclosure proceedings for residential properties are stayed, and we're not sure when they're going to resume. So until further notice, unless the parties can show that the delay of the foreclosure will place an undue burden on the defendant. So not sure what the undue burden might be, but a defendant could show that, in which case the foreclosure proceeding might go forward. However, generally they've all been stayed until further notice. So if there was a foreclosure proceeding that was going on prior to this and still ongoing during this, it's been stayed. I'm not aware of foreclosure proceedings having been filed during this, again, because I don't know as though the courts are considering those emergency filings. So I'm not aware of any going forward right now. Again, depending on the jurisdiction, on the court, it's worth checking, calling the court to check. You cannot be too thorough during this time. I can't stress this enough. So if you have a question about a foreclosure matter that's ongoing, call the court to check. If you have an attorney currently with it, call the attorney to check to see what's going on. Now, if you have a mortgage, if you own a property and you have a mortgage, there might be some relief from the Federal Housing Finance Agency. So there is a website there at the bottom. I would encourage you to check there if there is an issue with your mortgage and some relief is needed. So if you can't afford the mortgage payment because your income has been reduced during this time, if you are a landlord and you're unable to collect rent because of your tenants being out of a job, and you can no longer afford making that payment, there might be some relief. Also, if your mortgage loan is owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, again, a federally backed mortgage, and that kind of goes back to that first flow chart that we went over with the evictions. There is a federal component to this. So if you have a mortgage, again, this federal relief might be something that you are able to take advantage of. So look into it. If you're having trouble paying your mortgage, check into this and see if you're eligible for some federal relief. I can't stress this enough. Now with student loans, student debt is a big issue out there, and some other debts might be similar, but with student loans specifically, federally held student loans, interest rates have been set to 0. It was a 60-day period. It might be extended. I'm not sure. Non-defaulted borrowers have an option to suspend their payments for at least 2 months. So if all payments have been made up until around middle of March on time, there were no late payments, there were no defaults in the payments, then there's an option to stay those payments. I believe some of those were automatically stayed by the federal loan holders for 2 months. However, you could also opt to keep paying if you would like, because they're just going to be tacking that amount onto the end of the loan down the road. So it's not going to be like those payments that are just waived and you don't ever have to pay them. But interest has been waived. Those payments are going to, from what I can tell, tacked on the end of the loan. But you have some relief during this time period as far as making those payments. Now, collection actions and wage garnishments were also suspended beginning March 13th for 60 days. So that's might be coming to an end soon, but just check if you have an existing collection action or a wage garnishment. If you haven't been taking, haven't been collecting, and have not been garnishing your wages, that might end. So just be careful. Keep an eye on that 60 days and check so that you're aware and not surprised if the garnishments continue after that time period. If you are already in default with your student loan, contact the Department of Labor and see kind of what's happening with your loan now. Again, you don't want to make a situation worse by just avoiding it. And this kind of, that concept kind of deals with everything, with paying your rent as a tenant, you know, being open with your landlord. This isn't all just a free pass to not pay bills. That could just make the matter worse in the end. So be open, keep the lines of communication open with student loans. Check with the Department of Labor if you are in default. Now, private student loans don't apply to this. So I'm not sure what programs are out there for private student loans. I'd recommend contacting your service provider on a private student loan. They might have some options available for you as well. A payment plan, reduced payment, stuff like that. So again, communicate with them, be open. I would have to assume that if you're gonna be open with them, they're gonna try and work with you as well to get a situation that fits for both parties to continue making those student loan payments. Now with the stimulus checks, this was a big thing back with the CARES Act, the $1,200 stimulus checks. With the CARES Act, all U.S. citizens that had filed tax returns were eligible. All Social Security, SSDI, retirement, and railroad retirement recipients were also eligible, and all resident aliens with a green card were eligible. Now, there was certain people that were not eligible. So if you didn't have a Social Security number, even if you had a ITIN, then you still were not eligible. Undocumented immigrants and mixed status households were not eligible, and someone claimed as a dependent were not eligible either. So the checks, the amount of the checks given out really was a kind of a graduated system. So anyone that made $75,000 or less got $1,200 per person. Now, as the salary went up from $75,000 to $99,000, it kind of graduated down. And then over $99,000, if you made over that amount, you did not get a check. There were also dependent on head of household and married couple. So you got $2,400 per married couple. But again, a graduated system, the higher that household income was, then that stimulus check amount went down. For children that live with you, you got an extra $500. You had to claim them as a dependent on your last tax return, and they have to be under 17 with no significant income. And if your dependent doesn't qualify for the child tax credit, then you're not eligible for the extra $500. I know there's also been a lot of talk in the news about stimulus checks being slow to come out. If you electronically filed your tax returns, then the checks, the money would hit the account electronically and tended to be coming a little quicker. I'm not sure if checks are still being sent out or if they have sent everything out. If you haven't gotten a check yet, try contacting us and we can try and see if we can figure out what happened to it. So the amount of the check was based on your last tax return file. It was either 2018 or 2019. So if you had not filed 2019 yet, because the filing date was extended during all of this, then they would go off of the 2018 filing. And again, you don't have to do anything to receive that stimulus check. As long as you filed, it was coming to you either direct deposit into your bank account, or they were going to mail you a physical check. Now, if you did not file a tax return in 2018 or 2019, then you might not have to do anything either. Again, Social Security recipients, Social Security disability, railroad retirement, you were going to get the check anyway. You do not have to file a tax return. Or if you did not make enough to file a tax return, your income was so low that you did not have to file a tax return, you're still eligible for the For the check, you just might have to take some additional steps. You can find that on the IRS website. So I encourage you to do that if you have not done it yet. Again, if you not make enough to qualify to file for your tax return, you still are eligible for the payment, and check the IRS website for the eligibility and for the payment information. So with the stimulus checks, there's been some talk about, so I received the check, is it going to be, if I have a garnishment or if I have a judgment, is it money going to be taken out of the check? So if you owe money to a bank, they can only garnish it if it's deposited into your account. If there's a current judgment in state court, you can file to exempt your bank account before the check is deposited. Unfortunately, if it has been deposited, there might not be anything that you can do to save it. So if you're still waiting on a check and you have a judgment or a garnishment, be proactive to take steps to try and exempt that check from being subject to the judgment or the garnishment. With child support, if you owe the money, just like any other tax refund, if you owe child support, they're going to take money out of that to pay back child support. Now, if you owe back taxes, it will not be garnished. Quick check on the time. So, is there a part 2 to this? Recently, the information came out about the HEROES Act. The House passed it. It needs to get passed in the Senate, but it might mean another round of checks. And it's going to expand who is eligible for the checks. So they anticipate about 4 million more people will be eligible under the HEROES Act. So keep a lookout for this. It's not guaranteed, nothing's set in stone. This is just something I saw this week and wanted to add it in there. It probably would not happen until the fall. There's still a lot of barriers. Again, the Senate has to pass it. Even if they pass it, it might not look anywhere near as what it looked like when the House passed it. So just keep an ear out for it. It does open up to people who don't have a Social Security number, only have an ITIN number. It allows for undocumented immigrants and mixed status households to be eligible, as well as people someone's been claimed as a dependent and over 17 years old. So it's something that, again, to keep an eye on, and probably would not happen until this fall, if it happens at all. I just wanted to make you aware of it. Be on the lookout for fraud with stimulus checks going out, with cures for the vaccine, test kits, PPE. Be aware of fraud, phishing malware, price gouging. If you see anything like this, if anything is suspicious, don't go clicking on stuff on the internet. Don't accept test kits or PPE that are paid for it if it looks fraudulent or fake. You could just be losing money. Check the Maryland Attorney General's website, contact them, but be very careful about this. If there's any suspicion whatsoever, ask somebody. If your gut's telling you maybe this isn't true or maybe real, ask somebody. I can't stress that enough. There's a big issue going on around with fraud right now. So that about wraps it up. I know I went a little longer than I'd wanted to, but again, here's my email, my direct phone line. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. The beginning of the presentation was our virtual community lawyering email and phone number. I encourage you to contact either myself or the email address and phone number with any questions that I'm not able to answer here, or if you have any other legal issues that you are concerned about, and we're here to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you very much. So I think we'll open it up now for some questions, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Attorney Cagwin. Thank you so much on behalf of Reverend Dr. Sonia King and I. We are so appreciative of your time here with us.
Thank you.
We have one question here that has been presented. And the question is, I have been getting a lot of calls from student loan forgiveness. Are these legitimate?
it's tough to say. If they are claiming that they're going to forgive your student loans completely, I would say they likely are fake. The only student loan forgiveness I'm really aware of is a program where if you work in the public sector for a certain amount of time, I believe it's 10 years right now, then after that time period, your student loans, whatever balance is left, might be forgiven. I'm not aware of any business or opportunity to just have a student loan forgiven completely. Oftentimes, these calls for student loans are to try and refinance them, take them from one loan into a different loan, try and reduce your overall payment. That might be what it is, but they might be trying to rope you in under the guise of, we're going to forgive your student loan. Read the fine print, look into it, ask questions. Again, if you're unsure, just like with everything else, don't just go into it. If something's saying, I'm not sure about this, contact us. We can look at your current student loan, see what the structure is, see what emails or phone calls you've been getting. Check out the company. If the company has a website, investigate it. You have just as much a right to investigate the company to see if it is a legitimate company and what they're doing. You might find that the website that looks really, really funky and even more suspicion arises, and it probably is not something that's real. So investigate, do your homework as well. And again, if it comes down to it, we're here to help answer those questions also.
Thank you. Thank you. And one other question, if a person is looking forward to expunging their records, would you have some guidance for them at this time?
Certainly, yep. So expungements are a big part of what we do with the Community Lawyering Initiative. So right now, most jurisdictions aren't processing our filings. Again, going back to one of my earlier slides with the courts right now, e-filing courts are still accepting filings. However, we're not getting any real response from them once we file. Baltimore City, PG County, and Montgomery County are not accepting any filings at all right now for expungements, but we are still doing them. So I would really encourage you with the expungement front to contact myself or our virtual lawyering email. We'll have a paralegal call you, do a quick intake, and then we'll get you to the attorney. We'll look up your record real quick, send you the petitions, have you mail them back, get them ready to go. But yes, we still are doing that. As far as the expungement laws this year, unfortunately, nothing really changed to expand them. We were hopeful that there would be some expansion and more eligible charges and convictions would be enacted into law. I think the rise of the pandemic really put a stop to that, unfortunately. So there haven't been any changes, but call us and we will, anyone in the community lawyering group, we will look up your record, explain to you what's eligible, what's not eligible. If it's not eligible, why it's not eligible. And it might just be that you have to wait a little longer, but we'll go over all that with you. And if we are able to file for you now, we'll get everything going. We will file for you and then keep you updated. Again, if it's Baltimore City, PG County, or Montgomery County, we will just hold off on the filings. And then right now we're looking at June 8th as our kind of date. Come June 8th, we will get back in touch with you because we should know if the courts are going to open, and then hopefully we can get the process going at that time. So expungements, again, just like everything else, email myself, email the virtual lawyering email or phone number, give that a call, and we'll get that process going for you, certainly.
This is wonderful. Attorney Cagwin, this has been incredibly informative.
I hope so.
Yeah, it has been. And we even have some comments here from some of our participants. We thank you again. We are incredibly grateful for the information that you've shared with us around the HEROES Act, unemployment law, all of the other ways that we can check on our stimulus funding. And we do invite you again, those of you who are here, to go to irs.gov. We thank you for the work that you're doing with Maryland Legal Aid and with the Human Rights Initiative and uplifting human rights for all and justice for all.
Yeah.
We're again very, very grateful for your time with us. We know that there could have been many other places and things that you could do And so we're so grateful again for your time with us. For those of you who would like the slides that have been presented today, we will post them on Everyone Counts on our www.bwcumc.org/Everyone Counts landing page. We will also email these slides to all of the registrants. And I invite you to go and check out all of the upcoming webinars where you can learn more information about stimulus funding, ways that you can be an advocate for restorative justice in a COVID-19 era. Also invite you to come and learn more about the U.S. Census 2020. I'm Reverend Dr. Stacy Cole-Wilson on behalf of the entire team, Giovanni Arroyo, Dr. Sonia King, Andrea Johnson, Ann Price, Jan Taylor, and Chrissy Latona. We give God thanks for your presence here with us today. Again, thank you, Attorney Cagwin. God bless you all.